for our People's Assembly. I've always wanted to be a DJ, and I got my opportunity today to DJ some music. And it's been a long year, and we're coming up on the end of 2020. And so it's amazing. That song was written over 50 years ago, roughly, and it seems fresh in 2020. And so what we'd like for you to do is in the comments section, we'd like for you to put in your residence. What city are you from? Are you joining today? And if you are a Lansing resident, what ward are you in? What ward are you in? Now, if you don't know what ward you're in, there is a link in the comment section for you. There is a link in the comment section. I'm going to show my screen here. And so again, we thank you. My name is, many of you know me as Sean Holland, AKA Mordecai, and I will be your moderator for today. We have our co-hosts that are with us today, and they are identified as the asterisks prior to their name. So we want to thank them, those that will be facilitating in our breakout session. So fill up the comments section with what city do you live in? And if you are a Lansing resident, what ward do you live in? And then last but not least, we want to ask you, as we're at the end of 2020, what would you categorize as a win? Many of you all have done an amazing job. You've been working really hard for racial equity and addressing issues of discrimination, et cetera, and injustice. What would you categorize as a racial equity win for 2020? What would you categorize as a racial equity win for 2020? If you're needing any type of tech support, Sarah Gettle, she is also in the comment section, Sarah Gettle, Gettel, and you can send her a comment. Let's fill up the comment section again with these questions. Our sponsors for today are Liberation PAC, Black Political Power for Justice and Peace. Obviously, the One Love Global family is here, and convener for all things for racial equity and justice, centered along our work centers around youth empowerment and youth engagement, youth organizing, and Black Lives Matter Lansing and Black Lives Matter of Michigan and our allyship. So we have great sponsors for today's People Assembly. And again, we want you to fill up the comment section with answering these questions. And I'm going to ask Sarah or Jordan to read some of the comments in the comment section. What would you consider as a racial equity win? A racial equity win for 2020.
So far, we have higher voter turnout for folks who haven't voted in the past or who have voted rarely. Racism as a public health pandemic, those resolutions at the city, the county, and the state level. People reflecting on just having more conversations about race, including in predominantly white spaces. East Lansing is in a really positive process for developing an independent police oversight commission. Church folks attended CORR and Understanding Racism workshops, so that's great. Increased awareness of systemic racism among less oppressed classes. Thank you, everybody. These are wonderful. Yes, Sarah, the fact that a city council member has brought a resolution to defund the police and protect Black folks, and that the conversation is happening at a higher level, super, super important.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you, guys. Thank you all for putting your comments. I think it's important that, at the end of the day, we ask ourselves what went right. Like what are some of the positive things that are happening? Please continue to fill fill the comment section up, and we want to see what ward is best or most represented in today's People's Assembly. So we see we've got Ward 3. I said I've got some Ward 1s here. So if you are the 4th ward is represented. We got a lot of 4th ward represented here. And so we've got all the wards are actually represented here on in our People's Assembly today. And so again, if you're in need of tech support, Sarah Gettle will be providing tech support, and we have our facilitators. And we also have our co-host, Angela Waters Austin. She is here. Angela, would you like to just give everybody a wave and a hello this afternoon before we jump right in?
Hey, everyone. Here's my wave.
I can't see your wave. We've been doing this for a couple of months now. So, you know, you got to have fun when you're doing this work. It's stressful enough. So again, please give look, I'd like for you to put the little emoji up of the hands and give our facilitators a round of applause. Those who are volunteering, please show them some love in the comment section or put the emoji up on the screen for volunteering and facilitating today's session. Our agenda today will be centered around, obviously, we always like to talk about what is a People's Assembly and how will it benefit Lansing. And, you know, we always say every month that, you know, the People's Assembly is where we lift up the voices of the community. It's where the collective of the community determine the outcomes and not the elected. And the elected are those that the collective hold accountable to their promises and to execute the agenda that the collective have set. So again, this is the purpose of our People's Assembly, is to really bring everyone together as much as we can to discuss the pertinent issues that impact our community. So, you know, on behalf of One Love Global and all of our other sponsors, I want to thank you again for being a part. We will have our grounding. We always have our community agreements. And then we're going to have Lansing City Council updates by Councilmember Brandon Betts. He is with us on today. And then we're going to focus on the BREATHE Act. Our conversations will be around what would a Lansing BREATHE Act look like. So we'll look at the various components of the federal legislation and look at it from a state perspective. And then now we're going to bring you into a conversation today. What would a Lansing BREATHE Act looks like, right? So it's like taking us further. Where do we go from here? So when we talk about our People's Assembly, it is an ongoing process and dedicated.
You're muted.
Yeah. So it's an ongoing process, a dedicated space. No one owns this space, right? We're not here to manipulate the space. It is community driven and co-governance, democratize data, and make information accessible. So we talk about things, we share the city budget. We try to make information available, as well as sharing with you the surveys that you all have been a part of prior to this particular People's Assembly. And we center on those directly impacted. Our conversations are centered around who are the most vulnerable, the most impacted in our community. We build our vision and priorities together and hold ourselves and elected officials accountable and take action for delivering results. So that's why we're here. And we have our grounding. And we always talk about the beloved community. The conditions that create crime and violence are no longer present. Think about our community. You know, there are those that are in office that have a different vision than the beloved community. Why are these things beyond us? That's why we're here. Think about that. The conditions that create crime and violence are no longer present. Number two, outcomes can no longer be predicted by race. Number three, racial hierarchy is no longer a norm. And number four, everyone feels welcome and everyone feels safe. This is the beloved community. I know if you're on here listening to me, this is an amazing place to live in. And that's what we want to draw you into this space today, to let no one talk us out of pushing and dreaming and executing and really believing that we can create a beloved community, that we can live in a community, what we see here on the screen. I get all excited about this kind of stuff. I'm going to ask Jordan if she would go through our community agreements with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you can read along on the slide if you'd like, but I'll also say these aloud. But we prepared some community agreements today, and as a member and or a supporter of the Lansing community, we all agreed to make a conscious commitment to adhere to the following agreements. 1, respect. Respect the rights of others to hold opinions and beliefs that differ from your own. When you disagree, challenge or critique the idea, not the person. 2, affect. Practice intentional listening. Let your comments, requests for clarification, critiques, etc. reflect that you have paid attention to the comments made by the person who spoke before you. 3, inclusion. Make space, take space. Be mindful of others. Share responsibly. If you have much to say, try to hold back a bit. If you are hesitant to speak, look for opportunities to contribute to the discussion. 4, grace. Recognize that we are all still learning. Be willing to change your perspective and make space for others to do the same. 5, sanctuary. Create a safe space for sharing. Keep personal stories that people share confidential. And so we hope that everyone is always guided by and offers contributions that are rooted in and come from our desire to improve our beloved community of Lansing.
So if you agree to these, to this community agreement, I'm going to ask you to put the emoji up on the screen. Give us a hand or a thumbs up. You can hit that on the screen, or you can put it in the comment section. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. All right, we wanted to review our priorities, and we started our People's Assembly this summer. And so here are our top 3 priorities that we have identified as a community. And now we're building upon these and expanding out. Number 1, defund the police and invest the money in community organizations. Ensure livable wages for all to meet basic needs without worry. Number 3, divert funds to community programs and mental health help, and preventative measures. And so we said these are our 3 top priorities as it relates to community safety. We're going to, I'm going to ask Brandon if he would give us some updates from the Lansing City Council. We see that the resolution to defund the police was proposed in July. We are now in November. We also have the Anthony Hulan incident and then the recent incident with police brutality here in Lansing. So I'm going to ask Brandon if he would give us an update on the resolution. Where is it and where do we go?
Thank you, Sean, and thank you for allowing me to speak on this today. This is a major, when we were talking about, successes that we've had this year, I think that this is one of those that, doesn't look like a success on the front. We'll talk about this a little bit, but, it's changed the conversation and has really awakened a lot of people to what's going on in Lansing. And I think that it's really powerful. So as a little bit of background, if you didn't know, earlier this year, I believe it was June, Kathy Dunbar and I introduced a resolution to council to reinvest in the people of Lansing and defund the police. The goal was to create a subcommittee of some kind to start investigating the processes and things like that and the budgetary requirements and everything like that to kind of get to a point where we can, truly reinvest in the community and defund the police. And, you know, a lot of elected officials are always afraid about, you know, needing to get research done and things like that to figure out the processes to get things done. And that's exactly what this was going to do. Is it's set up a subcommittee within council to do research on this. Our goal and our intent was to get to identify allies and comrades in this fight on council to kind of push this forward. So there have been a few changes to it. Originally, the resolution called for a 50% reduction in the police budget over 5 years. Two of the swing votes on council were uncomfortable with that in the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee. That's what DEI is standing for in this. And it was switched to ask for research into a significant reduction in the police department from 50%, because as we all know, politicians are a little bit skeevy and they're not very comfortable with exact hard numbers. So we switched it to a significant amount, and then actually it was unanimously passed from the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee, which is something that's really important to note. There were 3 people on council, Peter Spatafor, Pat Spitzley, and Kathy Dunbar, who all said this thing is ready to be put into council and then passed. Now it got to council, and then there was a 90-minute discussion that we had about these priorities where specific council people, I will tell you who they were, Jeremy Garza, Carol Wood, and Adam Hussein, all said that they were against the proposal as to its form. Adam Hussein did mention that he'd be interested in having this discussion and doing the research, but he was not in support of the resolution itself. And then Brian Jackson, Kathy Dunbar, and myself, of course, all were in support of it. And then Peter Spatafor again voted it out of committee. So we thought that we had the votes for this. However, Patricia Spitzley decided to bring it back into committee to work on it some more because she was uncomfortable with the fact that we were calling for divestment from the police department. So now this is back in committee, and we're kind of just sitting and waiting to see what Pat Spitzley is going to do to this thing to make sure that to make her comfortable with passing it. Now, as we'll have discussions here moving forward, I think it's important to note that, you know, this is an ongoing process. This is a larger conversation than one resolution, and we're truly talking now about building community support and pushing this message forward in more ways than just doing this research, because in reality, the research has already been done. We know the answers. We know what we need to get done. And this is now we're in the stage where we need to start building up community and really start pushing this message forward. And I will stop at that. So that's an update on what's going on with the resolution, where it's at, where it's sitting, and a little bit about where we're talking about moving forward. So again, thank you, Sean, and I will turn it back to you.
Yeah, just a couple questions here. And if you've got questions for Councilmember Betts, please put it in the comment section. So, I mean, it's back in committee. And so if we talked about we have another city council meeting coming up on the 30th, what could the community expect? Like, what's the timeline?
Timeline for the resolution, I expected this thing to have an up or down vote in our last meeting. However, it was kind of a surprise for us that it was sent back to committee. Now what we're basically waiting on is for the committee to meet, to have a conversation, to change whatever things they feel like changing and all of that. Unfortunately, from my perspective, I don't think this thing is going to have much movement, because we've already said as a community, we want to divest in the police department, yet one of our 5 votes that we need, Pat Spitzley, has said very specifically that she is not willing to investigate reductions in the police department. So we're kind of sitting in a space right now where we're waiting, just seeing what happens, seeing who's in Pat's ear, and kind of just slowly moving this conversation along. Now, one thing to consider is next year we might not even need this resolution, because it might be that, you know, Kathy, myself, somebody, or Brian gets into a position in a committee where we can just start doing this research without a resolution. And that's kind of the thing that, you know, internal politics wise, we're looking at council right now, is how do we get somebody into a place that we can do this research without needing the support of somebody like Pat Spitzley, who said that she is fundamentally against defunding the police, and kind of push this thing forward. I see that Mary has or let's see here, Sarah says, is Pat still going to run it? That remains to be seen. So what's going to be happening next is, next year, our first meeting of the year, we're going to elect a new president of council. Now, Peter Spatafor has said that he's interested in running for president of council again. And then he will choose who the committee chairs and vice chairs and committee members are of each committee. So when we talk about will Pat still run this, that remains to be seen. I'm not sure exactly what Peter's thoughts are on this. And I think that we just need to have a conversation about this. What can you do to help? Well, I think that Mary also asked this question. You know, does Pat Spitzley need to hear from us? You know, my perspective on this is, I don't know who's in her ear, and I don't know who's telling her not to vote on this thing. It's one of those things that's a mystery to me, and something that I think that, you know, she has had ample opportunity to hear from the community every single week. I am proud of this group. I'm proud of other groups that I'm in, organizations that have, and people who have shown up week after week after week after week, testifying in support of this resolution and wanting to push this resolution forward. And, you know, for me to continue to ask all of you to, you know, harass Pat Spitzley is not something that I'm going to do. But I think that, you know, having these conversations, if you do know her, if you have any relationships with her, if you have any friendships with her or anything like that, being able to have those conversations and kind of see where she sits is a really important thing. So, you know, we're talking about next steps, next strategies. I think that talking to Pat Spitzley is important, but I think we also need to be focusing on the bigger game here, because the resolution is not the end of this conversation. It's only the beginning, and it's only a starting point to this thing. I think that through the People's Assembly process and through everything else that we're doing, there's going to be a lot more coming up that we need to put our focus on that isn't necessarily Pat Spitzley, because Pat Spitzley herself is just, you know, another person on council, and that's kind of how I look at that. And then Anna, thank you for that compliment. I saw that a couple of you were saying nice things about me, and it makes me feel very good. So thank you. Is there anything else that you've got for me, Sean?
Yeah, I just want to know that while we were, you know, this resolution was being drafted and proposed, we had the Anthony Hulan incident. We haven't heard of an outcry from the council. Like, are we seeing this wrong? Like, did a life not get removed? So when did the council like find out about this?
So this is actually an interesting question. So for those of you who don't know about the Anthony Hulan murder, he was murdered in police custody in our local jail as of, was it April? I believe that it was April. We found out recently through a report at April 11th. Thank you, Sarah. I need to have a better memory for these things. The LSJ just recently came out with an article this week that spoke specifically to the fact that an investigation was never done into Anthony Hulan's murder, into his death. I'm going to continue saying murder because it was murder. It was the medical examiner said that it was a homicide by positional asphyxiation, which, if you remember, unfortunately, George Floyd died the exact same way a month later. So this happens in Lansing. This is something that has happened in Lansing, and there was a huge cover up. We're unsure if it was Chief Green who covered it up. We're unsure if it was the mayor who covered it up, but we know that there was a cover up and that there was no investigation done. We know that all three officers are still on the force. They're still working today, and there has been no justice for Anthony Hulan at this point. Now, what council's been doing is we've had, small conversations about, oh, maybe we should defund the jail. Maybe we should, get rid of the jail entirely. There have been a few council people who have been supportive of that. There have been a few council people who have, expressed outrage, but in terms of the work that we've actually done, there's been nothing. We have not been calling for investigations. What we should be doing is the Committee on Public Safety should be putting together an investigation to see who knew what when, what we weren't told, what we were told, why Chief Green hid this from us, why Andy Shore hid this from us. And that process needs to happen. Now, you are right, Sean. Unfortunately, none of this work has happened up until this point. And it's really, really frustrating, because this is just another example of police brutality and a murder that happened. And those police are still on the force, still doing work today. And we don't have any justice at this point.
Okay, and then the last thing that we have on the screen here is the video that went viral a week and a half ago. I don't have the gentleman's name, but the police were called to respond to a potential fight. When they arrived, there was no fight. There were literally two guys on scene, and the video shows that at least 12 cops responded. It was basically, it looked and it was police brutality at its finest. Everything that, when we come to council meetings, oh, Lansing is not like this. Lansing is this beautiful, wonderful place. We don't know why you all are fighting for this. We don't understand this. And yet we see over and over, there were 12 police officers that responded to this situation. They were punching him in the face. They were on top of him. They were, it was awful. And so in one of the interviews that I did, they asked, well, what do you think? I said, people respond out of culture and training. That's not something that was, oh, I don't know how to do. They responded out of their training. That's the culture of the police force. And there was not one police officer that was, with a dissenting view or, hey, let's stop. They were all in it together. So I just wanted to, have you all received any details about that? Have you seen the body cam footage? We talk about accountability and transparency.
I will tell you that I have not seen anything, and it hasn't even been a conversation on council yet, which is surprising. Now, what I can tell you is that Chief Green today, I just got notification of this action. I was reading through it at the beginning of this meeting. Chief Green has made a statement on this, and I would say, what a police chief should be doing in this situation, which is firing a whole bunch of people who beat up an innocent person. Instead, he says, I'll say this, that, definitely the incident at Baker Street was an incident that looked bad on camera. And we'll immediately took those steps to make sure that our public knew that we were concerned about their feelings. So apparently the mayor's office is concerned about our feelings, but not concerned about getting justice for somebody who was brutalized by police. And I think that is something that's very frustrating. Now, we're asking these questions about, what work needs to be done, what we need to do moving forward. And I think, I've got to do a lot more work personally to get the other council people involved with this. I think that Angela asked a good important, where's the Public Safety Committee on this? I will tell you who the Public Safety Committee is. It's Jeremy Garza. There's a lot of representation in the second ward here. Jeremy Garza is your representative. He is chair of public safety. He could be doing this investigation that I've talked about now, and he has not had a conversation about this. We learned last Monday when the defunding resolution came to the table that Jeremy Garza was staunchly against it, and he was using white supremacist language to describe why he's against it. Crime rates are up and all these things, and violent crime and all these things, the scare tactics to get away having conversations about funding the police. And I think that this is one of our problems that we have. The vice chair of that committee is Carol Wood, who has also expressly said that she is pro-police. And so one thing that we need to think about is how to force these people on this committee to do the work that they're supposed to be doing in this investigation, or we need them out of that committee and we need to put somebody in that committee who will actually do this work.
Yeah, it's frustrating because, again, when it comes to the most vulnerable in our community and those that are on the margins, we always hear wait. And we have reached a boiling point where we will not wait. And we're holding all public officials accountable. This should be an outrage. I can't imagine being an elected official, knowing about the Anthony Hulan case while we're going through Breonna Taylor, we're going through George Floyd, we're going through Ahmaud Arbery, like all those things, we're after, right? And so I just want to highlight this for everyone that's in this assembly today, that if you think that there's not a sickness, then you need to reevaluate your lenses. And that's why we're here today. We've got committees, right? We've already done the research. So this is why we're here today, to bring you into this space to really think about those that are on the margins and the most vulnerable. And so again, we've got all, the mayor's always, throwing committees at everything, but nothing ever changes. And so I want to thank Congressman Betts for that update and your transparency and thanks again. Let's show Brandon Betts some love by putting up the thumbs up on the screen. Thank you for showing up to today's People's Assembly. And we could talk all day long, but we're gonna move forward in our agenda. So today we're gonna talk about, in your breakout sessions, we're gonna talk about what would it look like for Lansing to have a BREATHE Act. This legislation has been proposed on the federal level. There are conversations that are happening on the state level, and now we're having this conversation to contextualize this legislation on a local level, right? So when we talk about the BREATHE Act, what is it? This is our vision now taking the legs inside of policy. So again, you can see it on the screen. This visionary bill divests our taxpayer dollars from brutal and discriminatory policing and invests in a new vision of public safety, a vision that answers the call to defund the police and allows the communities to finally breathe. Lansing needs to breathe and be free. So there are four, simple steps. I'm trying to deal with this chat section, this chat feature. Hold on one second. Thank you. So there are four simple ideas that this legislation lays out. This is kind of the skeleton. Number one, defund the police, divest federal resources from incarceration and policing. I told you the last time that I was at the White House, or I didn't tell you, the last time I was at the White House and we were in senior staff meetings, the conversation, that we were in, one of the conversations was around prison reform. But that conversation did not happen unless we are currently short of physical bodies to keep the economy moving forward. And so prison reform came on the back of economic reform and the economic engine of America. And so the current president brought in about 300 of the most influential corporations around America and said, listen, we can't move the US economy forward because we no longer have the labor base. So what we are going to do, we're going to reform prisons and criminal justice so that we can have labor. It wasn't about humanity and dignity and making wrong things right. It wasn't about really dismantling systems of harm. It wasn't about justice. It was about money. And I was there and I listened at the whole conversation. And they made them sign affidavits that they would not wait for a trained labor force in America, but that once people are released from prison and released from jails around the country, that they would invest in training and hiring versus waiting for a trained employee and then hiring. So we have major systemic issues, and this legislation calls for a real dismantling of the system. Number two, true community safety. Invest in new non-punitive and non-carceral approaches to community safety that leads states to shrink their criminal legal systems and center the protection of Black lives, including Black mothers, Black trans people, and Black women, the most vulnerable. Number 3, meaningful investment in people. Allocate new money to invest in healthy, sustainable, and equitable communities. Number 4, holding our officials accountable, holding political leaders to their promises, and enhance the self-determination of Black communities. Section 1 of the bill of this act, number 1, repeals major programs and agencies that are currently funding state and local criminal legal systems. Recommend ways to shrink military spending and make police policy changes across areas of policing, pretrial detention, bail, and in indigent defense. Section 2, create a community public safety agency that will conduct research on alternatives to policing, provide grants that encourage state and local governments to shrink their criminal legal systems and police budgets. I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and they were talking about one of the deals that President Obama had to make was, in order to get us out of Afghanistan, they played hardball and said, well, we bought all of this ammunition and all of this military equipment. If we pull out of Afghanistan, what are we going to do with all this ammunition and all this military equipment? And so the federal government purchased much of that weaponry. And that weaponry has ended up in the police departments around the country. And so we need to have these conversations, and we need to understand exactly what's going on. So when we talk about demilitarizing the police, when you understand the origin, it helps us to have a more healthy conversation and provide grants that encourage state and local governments to shrink their criminal legal systems and police budgets. We're not just shooting in the wind and throwing a pebble in the ocean. Section 3, create funds so that our tax dollars support programs to directly build education justice, housing justice, health and family justice, environmental and climate justice, economic justice for our communities. And finally, the BREATHE Act will incentivize states to end the voter suppression that has denied political empowerment, right? Incentivize states to design decertification programs that not only decertify offending police officers, but entire police departments that have a pattern of misconduct. So that's the federal, that's kind of the skeleton looking at it, right? Because this is what we're going to ask you to do, is to talk in your breakout sessions, what would a Lansing BREATHE Act look like? I'm going to ask Angela Waters Austin if she would give us some insight on the mission on the state level. What does this look like on the state level?
Hi, everybody. Apologies for not being on camera today, but I've been in back-to-back meetings all day, and none of them was with a hairdresser. So I am so excited and proud to share with you that our very own Representative Sarah Anthony is actually championing a Michigan BREATHE Act. And we are at the very beginning stages of that. And that looks like researching what legislation has already passed, what is already in the works, and what is even in the idea and early formative stages. And already it looks like there are 300 bills that crosswalk with the federal BREATHE Act. The champions at the federal level are our very own Michigander, Detroiter, Rashida Tlaib, and Representative Ayanna Pressley. So we have powerhouses on the community co-sponsoring side. We have our own Lansing leadership helping us to build this out at the state level. And we want to make sure that that Lansing is in alignment with and being true to both the letter and the spirit of the BREATHE Act. And we also are going to hold that same fidelity at the state level. What we don't want to have happen is what we just learned about, that what looked like a major win in LA of defunding 10% actually looks like the city backdooring and moving that money back into the city, and instead of investing in Black communities. So when you get into your sessions, we have to be thinking about accountability, transparency, and how we ensure that we're not just defunding, but that we're actually building systems and policies and structures that work for us. And so at the state level, we have a coalition that looks like Lansing for Black Lives, which we just launched here in our community. So at the state level, we have Black-led organizations who are also in alignment with the over 150 Black-led organizations at the national level who are moving the federal Breathe Act. So we're building that same formation at the state level and at the local level. And at the state level, we have already prioritized a Black agenda for Michigan. We spent a series of sessions called the Black National Convention, where we came together with 25 other states, and we had our statewide delegation. And our deep commitment is to dismantling structural racism. And the Breathe Act is the civil rights act of our generation. And our top 3 agenda items are environmental and climate justice. Thank you, Flint, for lifting that up. They used all their votes to make sure that that was elevated to the top. That's strategy, wise strategy. Educational justice. And of course, I think we all agree on that, but that was absolutely where One Love Global and Black Lives Matter are putting our votes on the table, as well as with the third E, which is economic justice. And as you have all, some of you have probably heard me say over the past decade of us doing this work in Lansing, that change isn't change until it hits the pockets. And back to you, Mordecai.
Thank you, Angela. Amazing. So at this right here, before we go into our breakout sessions, what are you feeling right now? What are you hearing? Are you hearing something new? Are you feeling something new? Just put that in the comment section while we go through again. Like, we're going to ask you to continue to dream and to reimagine, like reimagine schools free of police and full of trained counselors, and where there's restorative justice programs. Right now, nationally, the current student counselor ratios are 485 to 1. And that number should probably be around 200 to 1. Reimagining trauma-informed interventionists who can be called on in domestic violence situations, those who are trained in long-term safety, healing, and prevention. Imagine that. Like, why is that too far out? And then 911 operators dispatching unarmed mental health experts and callers being able to request responders who connect to their gender identity, to the gender identity of the person in crisis. So here are your questions. These questions will be placed in the comment section, and we'll also put them in the notification. You have your facilitators. You will have 1 hour. You will have 1 hour in your breakout sessions. And then after that hour, we will bring you back and we will have a time of sharing. So Sarah, are there any parting instructions from a technical standpoint?